Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung is in Malaysia for the ASEAN Summit, where he's also scheduled to meet with the Cambodian Prime Minister today. Meanwhile, the APEC Economic Leaders Week kicked off today in Gyeongju, as South Korea gears up to host a series of highly anticipated meetings. After U.S. President Donald Trump described North Korea as sort of a nuclear power, the South Korean government responded by saying that it's closely working with the United States on their shared goal of denuclearization. Amid trade tensions over rare earth materials, the United States and China have reached a framework agreement, signaling progress ahead of a meeting between the two countries' leaders. We begin this morning in Malaysia, where South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is attending his first ASEAN Summit since taking office. For more, our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin, who is traveling with the president, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Yoo-jin, what's on the agenda for day two?
Well, first of all, good morning, Eun-ji. So South Korean President Lee Jae-myung begins his second and last day here in Malaysia with a summit with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet. Now, the two leaders will discuss strengthening their strategic partnership and especially ways to jointly combat transnational online scam crimes. Now, as you know, Eun-ji, this issue has been a major concern here in South Korea following the death of a Korean college student who is believed to have been lured to Cambodia by a scam gang, as well as the repatriation of dozens of Koreans allegedly involved in similar crimes. So last week, President Lee chaired an emergency response meeting during which the government decided to establish a special task force on transnational crimes and launch a joint consultation body involving the Foreign Ministry, Justice Ministry, Financial Services Commission, and the National Intelligence Service.
Right, and Yoo-jin, after the South Korea-Cambodia summit, what else is lined up before the president returns home?
Well, I would say that it's quite a packed schedule today, Eun-ji, because after the South Korea-Cambodia summit, President Lee will attend the South Korea-ASEAN Summit and then the ASEAN +3 Summit, which brings together South Korea, Japan, and China, as well as the ASEAN member countries. Now, starting with the South Korean-ASEAN Summit, President Lee will introduce his administration's new vision to further strengthen their comprehensive strategic partnership, which is the bloc's highest level of partnership that it established with Seoul last year. So take a listen to what National Security Advisor Wee told reporters about this vision.
Our new dream is based on the acronym CSP, standing for Contributor for the Dreams and Hope, Springboard for Growth and Innovation, and Partner for Peace and Stability.
Now, we'll get to hear the details once the summit starts, but the president is expected to propose expanding trade, boosting people-to-people exchanges, and coordinating responses to cross-border crimes such as scams and drugs. And at the ASEAN +3 summit, President Lee will focus on cooperation in finance and food security. Now, finally, before wrapping up his two-day visit in Malaysia, he will also hold a meeting with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim before returning to Seoul by boarding the presidential jet this afternoon. Now, once he returns to South Korea, waiting for him is the APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Gyeongju, as well as high-stakes summit with U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping. Back to you, Eun-ji.
All right, Yoo-jin, thank you for that report. Do keep us updated. And also on the first day of his trip to Kuala Lumpur, President Lee Jae-myung also vowed institutional reform to ensure Koreans living abroad can exercise their right to vote without any inconvenience. He made the comments on Sunday local time while meeting the Korean community in Malaysia. The promise aligns with an earlier pledge to improve the overseas voting system. He also promised to make a country that overseas Koreans can be proud of. Meanwhile, on trade talks between South Korea and the United States, President Lee says the two countries remain stuck on major details of negotiations. In an interview with Bloomberg ahead of a meeting with his American counterpart Donald Trump this week, he said all the details remain sticking points, including the method of investment, the amount, and the timeline. He added that the United States will try to maximize its interest, but must not create catastrophic consequences for South Korea. The allies have been struggling to narrow key differences over the deal, including Trump's demand that Seoul make a $350 billion investment upfront in return for lower tariffs. In other news, South Korea's top office said the government will work closely with the United States on their shared goal of denuclearization, after President Donald Trump referred to North Korea as sort of a nuclear power. Meanwhile, North Korea sent its top diplomat to Russia and Belarus, a move that could possibly make talks between the U.S. and the regime less likely. Our Moon Ji-young reports.
Following U.S. President Donald Trump's remarks referring to North Korea as sort of a nuclear power, a South Korean presidential official said on Sunday that Trump appeared to recognize the advanced reality of North Korea's nuclear capabilities rather than officially recognizing its status or abandoning nuclearization goals. They also reaffirmed close coordination with the U.S. on denuclearization. Trump made the remarks during a press meeting aboard Air Force One on Friday in response to a question about Pyongyang's stance that recognition as a nuclear power is a prerequisite for talks with Washington. He departed for an Asia tour over the weekend, which includes a visit to South Korea, and expressed a strong desire to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
I do. And if you want to put out the word, I'm open to it. You know, they don't have a lot of telephone service. They have a lot of nuclear weapons, but not a lot of telephone service. So I'm open to it. I had a great relationship with him, and he probably knows I'm coming, right?
However, prospects of a U.S.-North Korea meeting seem to have dimmed as North Korean Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee departed Pyongyang for a trip to Russia and Belarus. According to the North State media, the Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Choi's visit to the two countries is at the invitation of their foreign ministers. Her absence during the run-up to Trump's visit to South Korea suggests that talks between Kim and Trump are unlikely to materialize. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, top U.S. and Chinese economic officials agreed on a framework for a new trade agreement ahead of a highly anticipated meeting between their two leaders. The framework trade deal potentially avoids an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods into the United States. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Top U.S. and Chinese economic officials have agreed on the framework of a new trade agreement, signaling progress ahead of a highly anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer met with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng and top negotiator Li Chenggang on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur on Sunday, marking the fifth round of in-person discussions since May. Speaking to ABC News on the same day, Bessent said the two sides averted further tariffs thanks to the maximum leverage provided by Trump.
The president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that so that the tariffs will be averted.
Bessent said a substantial framework was put in place for the two leaders, adding that China has agreed to delay its expanded licensing regime for rare earth exports by 1 year, a move seen as a concession to ease trade tensions. He also said that China has agreed on substantial agriculture purchases for U.S. farmers. Meanwhile, President Trump arrived in Malaysia on Sunday for the ASEAN Summit, his first stop on a 5-day Asia tour that will culminate his face-to-face meeting with Xi in South Korea on Thursday. Both sides are hoping to defuse mounting trade tensions following months of tariff threats and countermeasures. The new framework, if finalized, could mark a turning point in the trade dispute, with officials emphasizing cooperation over confrontation as they prepare for the leaders' summit later this week. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So as South Korea prepares to host a summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, along with a series of other high-level meetings, the APEC Economic Leaders Week kicked off here today in Gyeongju. For more on this, we're joined today by Christopher Goding, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. Professor Goding, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
So ahead of APEC, President Lee Jae-myung is in Malaysia for the ASEAN Summit, and he's also set to hold a meeting with the Cambodian Prime Minister today. Could you tell us more about the significance of his trip to the region before we go into details about the APEC?
Well, first, for the moment, we are navigating in uncharted waters ever since Donald Trump got elected, and also because the international situation as a whole is very uncertain with the situation in Palestine, with the situation in Ukraine. So for a middle power like Korea, the first task of the president is to somehow ensure some feeling of normalcy, business as usual, that normal channels of communication are still operating. That's the first thing. The other thing is that the ASEAN is not like the EU, for instance. It is mostly a free trade agreement. The main aim, if not the sole aim of the ASEAN, is to improve trade relations. It is to boost trade between all of its member states. And so in this case, as the South Korean economy is heavily dependent on exports, basically, for its growth, for President Lee, here the agenda is very straightforward. It is about finding new trading partners in order to make up for the strained relationship we all know about with the U.S. that used to be one of Korea's main trade partners until very recently.
Right, and Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping will be here in South Korea this week. What might be on the agenda when they meet in Busan?
As always, trade. It's all about the money here. In fact, the situation is relatively simple because they have to come to an agreement. From the U.S. point of view, the U.S. economy is heavily disindustrialized. There are plenty of consumption goods that America doesn't produce anymore, and so to this extent, America needs China. America also needs China for, as it was mentioned in your report earlier, for its rare earth elements, in particular for the tech industry. So Google, Apple, and all of the others, they need to import these rare earth elements from China. Now, considering the Chinese point of view, you know that the Chinese economy has been slowing down for a few years, basically since the COVID-19 era, and domestic consumption is stalling. Therefore, Chinese need to export for their economy not to collapse. As you know, for instance, youth unemployment in China is already skyrocketing. So I don't know how, but China and America have to come to an agreement no matter how much they hate it. And as far as we can tell, and as your report mentioned earlier, they are getting close to an agreement. I assume we can expect reasonably some major announcement to be made at the end of this summit. I think so.
Right, we'll have to see if they do reach a final agreement. And Trump's also interested in meeting North Korea's Kim Jong-un during his Asia trip. What's your take on the possibility of a summit between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump?
With Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, anything is possible. Anything is possible because both are highly unpredictable. No, I am more skeptical about the outcome of a meeting, should such a meeting take place. Because, let's face it, the only thing America is interested in regarding North Korea is denuclearization. The one thing Kim Jong-un and North Korea are never to give up on, it is nuclear weapons. So they may meet, some kind of summit may take place, but I cannot see realistically how they could come to any kind of agreement. What we can expect is what took place in Singapore a few years ago in 2018 or 19. They will meet up, they will shake hands, as we are seeing right now in front of cameras, and nothing is to follow. That's the most likely outcome, in my opinion.
I see. I guess it's very hard to predict if they will meet here in South Korea or during Trump's Asia trip. And ahead of APEC, North Korea sent its Foreign Minister Choi Sun-yi to Russia and Belarus. What might be behind this move?
Oh, it's very straightforward, I'm afraid. What we are seeing is North Korea getting further and further away from China and closer to Russia, meaning that the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, is prioritizing military alliances with Russia, in particular with these troops that North Korea has dispatched in Ukraine, as you know, over trade relations, in particular with China and the rest of the world. So what we can see now is that Kim Jong-un is moving on to a more and more aggressive approach, and this is why he's posing more and more openly as an ally to Vladimir Putin. Remember that North Korea, is the only foreign power that sent troops to Ukraine in order to support the Russian invasion. So that says a lot, and this part, I'm afraid, from the South Korean point of view, is deeply concerning.
Right, that sounds very concerning indeed. All right, Professor Goding, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States will meet in Seoul early next month for their annual security talks. Seoul's defense ministry said Monday that Minister An Gyu-baek and U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will hold a 57th security consultative meeting on November 4th, marking their first in-person talks. The two are expected to discuss policy coordination on North Korea, the allies' combined defense posture, and extended deterrence measures. Naval maintenance and repair cooperation will also be on the agenda. The ministry added that both sides aim to strengthen their alliance in a future-oriented and mutually beneficial way to address evolving regional threats and security challenges. Now, shifting gears, South Korea's National Assembly convened on the weekend in a rare show of bipartisan cooperation to pass bills spanning healthcare, welfare, education, and environmental reform. Our political correspondent Buniran has the details.
The National Assembly held a rare weekend plenary session on Sunday, passing a total of 76 bills aimed at improving citizens' welfare and addressing key social issues.
I believe that holding a plenary session on Sunday with bipartisan agreement is very meaningful, as it demonstrates both parties' commitment to passing livelihood-related bills.
Among the most notable legislation is a bill designed to prevent gaps in emergency room care by improving patient triage and establishing direct communication channels between emergency medical institutions and transport providers. Other bills passed during the session cover a wide range of social and public welfare issues. Amendments to the Child Welfare Act now allow foster parents to exercise legal authority over financial accounts for the children in their care. A new law also prohibits sex offenders from operating or working in accommodation serving foreign nationals. In addition, lawmakers passed legislation establishing lifelong education programs for people with disabilities to promote independent living and social participation. Bills were also approved to support the stable supply of essential medicines, ensure interest relief on student loans, and provide compensation support for victims of digital sex crimes during criminal proceedings. Financial and administrative reforms were included as well. Local governments will now be able to issue bonds in response to unforeseen urgent financial needs. The creation of the National Assembly Records Office was authorized to manage official parliamentary documents. Environmental accountability was strengthened through enhanced procedures for greenhouse gas reduction plans aimed at achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. During the session, lawmakers also formally reported a notion for a parliamentary investigation into last year's Jeju Air plane crash at Muan Airport, signaling continued oversight of government affairs. Political observers say the session reflects growing pressure on lawmakers to focus on public welfare amid ongoing partisan disputes. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Good morning. I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In Kuala Lumpur on Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump co-signed a ceasefire deal between Thailand and Cambodia in Washington's strongest diplomatic push in the region this year. The truce, signed on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit, formalizes an earlier July agreement that halted 5 days of border fighting that killed dozens and displaced thousands. Its first phase includes the release of captured soldiers, the removal of landmines, and international troop monitoring along the frontier. Alongside the peace pact, Washington announced trade deals with Malaysia and Cambodia and an MOU on critical minerals and supply chain resilience with Thailand. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 10% tariff increase on imports from Canada on Saturday after a political spat over an advertisement sponsored by the Ontario government, which quotes former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. The ad, which includes part of an address made by Reagan in 1987, where he said tariffs hurt every American, was described by Trump as a fraud. Trump also criticized Canadian officials for failing to withdraw the ad before World Series matches between Canada's Toronto Blue Jays and U.S. team, the LA Dodgers. Canada is currently the only G7 country without a fresh deal under Washington's tariff regime, which already includes levies of 35% on goods, 50% on metals, and 25% on automobiles. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce urged both sides to resolve the dispute through diplomacy, urging that escalating tariffs would hurt North American competitiveness. In Moscow on Sunday, Russia announced a successful test of its nuclear-powered Burevestnik cruise missile. Russian officials say the missile, known by NATO as Skyfall, flew for 15 hours and covered about 14,000 kilometers, demonstrating its ability to evade missile defenses. The Kremlin says the weapon, powered by a nuclear engine, could soon be deployed as part of its strategic arsenal, calling it a system no one else in the world has. The test came just hours after Russia launched one of its deadliest air assaults on Ukraine in weeks. More than 100 drones and missiles struck residential areas in Kiev, killing at least 3 civilians and injuring dozens. Ukrainian officials said Russia has unleashed nearly 1,200 drones and 50 missiles in the past week alone. In Paris on Saturday, police arrested 2 suspects over the recent jewelry heist at the Louvre Museum, one of the boldest art thefts in French history. Authorities say one suspect was detained at Charles de Gaulle Airport as he prepared to board a flight out of the country, and another was reported planning to travel to Mali. They didn't say whether any of the jewelry, valued at more than $100 million had been recovered. The arrests come a week after 4 masked thieves used power tools and a ladder truck to break into the museum's Gallery of Apollo in broad daylight. Officials say DNA evidence found at the scene led to the suspect's identification. France's justice minister admitted security protocols had failed, damaging the country's global image. In response, the Louvre has tightened security and transferred its most valuable pieces to the Bank of France's underground vaults.
An unseasonably harsh cold front has brought early winter conditions back to the peninsula. The season's first cold wave advisories have been issued for the inland areas of central parts of Korea. And furthermore, strong winds advisories are active for parts of Chungcheong-namdo and the west coast of Jeollado provinces. The rest of the country is also dealing with biting cold winds that are driving down temperatures. Tomorrow will be even colder, with Seoul's morning low is forecast to drop down to further 2 degrees Celsius. And this round of severe cold snap will gradually recover to seasonal averages as we head towards the end of the week. This afternoon, daytime highs will remain chilly, only reaching 11 degrees here in the capital. Daegu, Gwangju will be topping out at 13 degrees, but skies will be mostly clear nationwide. Then we can look forward to return to a late autumn weather at the end of the week, with rain in the forecast on Friday in the capital area and west of Gangwon-do province.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.